So, this year, 2014, we are hoping to put on a number of workshops. The first 3 are going to be encountering and exploring Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So, my first question for you, Pete, is who is Patanjali?
Short answer is that we don't know.
Yeah.
There's not much historical.
He's a bit of a mystery, isn't he?
Bit of a mystery. Yeah. There's not much historical record. There is somebody who supposedly wrote a text that we know as the Yoga Sutra, popularly known as the Yoga Sutra. The actual title of the text that Patanjali gives it is Yoga Darsana.
Oh yes, I remember
Yeah,
you telling me about this earlier on.
Yeah, which is a short and highly respected text on yoga. It's a variety of yoga it's often called Raja Yoga. Patanjali himself doesn't use that term, but it's a term that's popularly applied to his approach. Raja Yoga means the kingly yoga. You know, it's like this kind of he wants to kind of talk it up.
Yeah.
You know, or
yeah.
people who use that term want to talk it up. You know, but it is an amazing text, incredibly pregnant and very, very useful. I think, and Patanjali is thought to be the author of that text. Now there are other mentions of Patanjali in various chronicles and writings and so forth. And it seems there was a grammarian called Patanjali. A grammarian is somebody who studies grammar, and there's somebody who wrote on Sanskrit grammar, a text on Sanskrit grammar. It may be that this is a different person, it may be the same person. I think scholars these days are coming down that it was a different person.
Yeah.
We can actually date Patanjali the grammarian because he mentions a particular a siege of a city when the Greeks invaded India in whenever it was, 120 BC, I think, something around that time. And Patanjali mentions this in his book on grammar, so it may be the same or not. You know, there was also a doctor and writer on medicine called Patanjali.
Oh yeah.
There was a dance master called Patanjali. In the southern Indian tradition, in the Tamil tradition, there's a siddha. A siddha is a powerful, because the word siddhi means power, doesn't it? A powerful yoga practitioner, yoga master, called Patanjali, apparently operative in southern India around the time period we're talking about.
So we're not really sure
so we got
who
this
was
kind of
exactly.
yeah. I mean, on top of that, you get there's the Indian way of turning prominent figures into gods. You know, and Patanjali is treated mythically as an incarnation of a divine serpent. You know, or perhaps as an incarnation of.
And you were mentioning
Vishnu.
the statues and things before.
There are statues of Patanjali. And they're very interesting because he's seated in meditation. He's quite straight and he's got a serene expression, but he's encircled with a serpent 4.5 times round his trunk, which then rises up behind his head there, and it's a 7-headed cobra. So there are 7 heads round the back of Patanjali's head there.
Yeah.
All the cobras have got their, you know, they can fan out this kind of hood.
Their hoods.
So they've all got their hoods fanned out and they're kind of
Yeah.
protecting him there, you know.
Yeah.
So that serpent is thought to be Ananta,
Yeah.
the endless one. Ananta is the word you'd use for infinity, perhaps, you know, Ananta. It just means the endless one. So that gives a sense of Patanjali, how Patanjali is tuned into the infinite. But also, of course, snakes are great symbols of the energy of the earth. You know, snakes crawl on the earth and they hide in cracks in the rocks, you know. And this is a sense that you get in the Old Testament. You know, the serpent is the corruption of the earth, the way our spirituality is corrupted by the earth, by the serpent, who in the Christian myth is the devil, you know. So all power to India for being a bit less sniffy about serpents. And so Patanjali, not only is he in tune with the infinite, and this serpent reaching up and sheltering him, he's also in tune with the energy of the earth.
Yeah.
You know, which I think that's how I read that particular image. And of course, you know, in yoga, the serpent is Kundalini, you know, the raw Shakti energy that animates our lives, and our meditations particularly makes them very luminous and sparky and energised. So we have these statues, but again, of course, we're on the terrain of the mythical and the symbolic.
The mythical Patanjali.
Yeah. Now, when you read the text the first time you look at Yoga Sutra, maybe first million times you look at the Yoga Sutra, you just feel quite impersonal.
Yeah.
It's a bit like bullet points. It's short. It's very pithy. It's 100. I should have looked up them. It was 156, I think. Aphorisms. You know, the short, pithy sentences. Some are only a couple of 3 words long. Some are a little bit longer, but you can get the whole thing on a couple of sides of A4. It's very, very short and pithy. And so it comes across in this kind of bullet points, telegraphic fashion, and therefore it's quite impersonal. They're almost like little aids to memory. So again, you know, that's compounding the mystery of Patanjali the man.
Yeah.
Patanjali the man, and it's almost as though Patanjali the man is not wanted in the picture. We're not meant to encounter this text as a personal statement.
Right.
And in its impersonality, it's I think meant to gain authority. It's a bit like the tablets of stone that Moses fetched down the mountain. It's just like, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not. You know, it's authoritative. And of course, if Patanjali is a god, that makes it even more authoritative. Now, what I'm finding increasingly, having lived with the text of the Yoga Sutra for 50 years, is that Patanjali the man is starting to come through for me. You know, that there is a sense of a human personality.
Yeah.
And you get, after a while, after quite a long while, you get the sense of being in dialogue. Despite this initial impersonality, you get the sense of being in dialogue with a really good teacher, you know, and of course, which is what a relationship with a living teacher, if it's going to work for yoga, does have a very, very living, open quality in which there's it's almost the teacher and the student become an organism that's functioning in a kind of systemic way.
Yeah.
You start to get that with the Yoga Sutra, and you start realising that the Yoga Sutra it's a practice. It's a practice manual.
Yeah.
You know, and it really what it's doing is giving us pointers. You know, Patanjali doesn't attempt to say what cannot be said. He doesn't attempt to F the ineffable.
Yeah.
He's pretty smart, I have to say. Pretty smart. So instead of attempting this impossible thing, he does nevertheless point for us, which of course is that it's you know, this is very, very well understood in Zen. You know, the teacher points, you know, for you. And that can be done, and I think once you realise that that's what's happening, you do get this sense of a human voice, of somebody who knew what he was talking about because he'd experienced it, and he's able to give you pointers so that you will experience for yourself what he's wanting to point out.
And just to throw something else interesting in there, what do you think that Patanjali's experiences were? We were talking earlier on about the yogas being the true rebels, the first rebels, and how they, what was the word you used?
Countercultural.
Yeah.
You know,
do you think he was one of them?
Well, this is such an...
This is a tricky question.
This is a tricky and very, very interesting question that resonates with many of the debates that are going on planet yoga at the moment, at least the ones I'm aware of. The Yoga Sutra is considered to be a part of a system of orthodoxy which was put together, we think, in the Gupta period, say around somewhere between 200 and 400 AD, or Common Era. So it's after the time of Christ, a couple of 3-4 centuries. There was a kind of a movement to codify what we now call Hinduism, to make it distinct from the heterodox religions of Buddhism and Jainism and other religious tendencies that were going on in India that were non-Vedic. So there was some kind of a movement went on to just to put the boundaries around orthodoxy, and what was produced was what's called Sanatana Dharma, which means, loosely translated, the universal religion or the eternal religion. And that was thought to have 6 separate approaches, darsanas. Yeah.
What does darsana mean? Darsana mean?
A darsana is a way of seeing. The word derives from the same Sanskrit root for the word to see.
Oh yeah.
So they were, I suppose a good way of putting it is a perspective. It gives 6 perspectives on ultimate reality.
Yeah.
The purpose of religion is to encounter ultimate reality, whatever that is. So there are 6 approaches. They're quite distinct. They're not necessarily consistent with each other, superficially. And there were 6, and it was put together by a committee, I think, to be honest with you, because Hinduism, Indian religion on the ground, you can't really contain it within the 6. There's too much polytheism. There are too many local deities. There are too many quirky customs that are peculiar just sometimes to a single village. But nevertheless, it seems like some kind of committee thing happened that tried to pull it together for political reasons as much as anything else. Yoga is incorporated in that, so that makes yoga orthodox, and the yoga that was incorporated into the orthodoxy by this thing was Patanjali's particular version of it. Having said that, it seems that yoga has got very, very, very deep roots in what is called the Shramana traditions, and the Shramana traditions were pretty countercultural, and the Shramana movement informs Buddhism, Jainism, and so on. But these were the guys that found that they wanted to investigate consciousness.
Yeah.
For all kinds of reasons, but they found that this was difficult to do within the constraints of a fairly hierarchical and organised society, in which religious doctrine was in the hands of a priestly class, and so they basically dropped out and went off into the forests and the mountains to get away from this.
Grew the hair.
Crap, and to grow their hair. They sometimes, I think,
they call the long hairs.
Sometimes they were called the long hairs. I forget the exact Sanskrit term now, but there was one of the nicknames they got was the long hairs. And they went off to the forests because they couldn't deal with orthodoxy. They couldn't do what they wanted to do.
The original hippies. Because
it was experimental and self-reliant rather than ritualistic. You see, the Orthodox religion of the time when all this was happening was ritualistic. The idea was you made sacrifices to the gods, or you performed rituals to the gods. You'd perhaps light a sacred fire and say the chants and all this kind of stuff. And only the priestly class was allowed to do this on your behalf, in order to mediate with the gods, so that they would make sure that your crops didn't fail, or that your son would pass his exams, or whatever. People are still doing this kind of stuff with religion. Attempting to propitiate the gods. And this is perhaps one of the oldest religious motives across the planet, propitiating the gods. So, because you want good fortune, you know. I mean, I could basically superstition. These guys were wanting to find out. They weren't going to take it on at face value what they were just dished out.
Good for them.
But by the rather conservative forces of society, and yoga is deeply rooted in that, you know. And but of course, as we're saying here, it later got reincorporated through the Sanatana Dharma and various other mechanisms, reincorporated into the social system, and that is a tension that is still going on, you know. And they're right. These forces are obviously in tension. Now, my thought about Patanjali is and about the Yoga Sutra, that this is a Shramana document.
Yeah.
This is a countercultural document because, well, firstly, Patanjali exhibits no taste whatsoever for ritual and sacrifice. There's no mention of any of that stuff. He's not interested in it. Secondly, he shows no preference for any kind of geographical location. You know, he's not kind of banging the drum for India. Can I put it like that?
Yeah.
He shows no preference for any particular social class.
Because caste was very important at that time, wasn't it? And that...
It got more important. Yeah, I mean, but certainly, you know, the Vedic religion was a priestly religion, certainly. Next thing, it shows no preference for any ethnicity. It's just it's a transcultural document in as much as you can get one.
Yeah.
And it's devoid of religiosity. And that's one of the reasons, you know, given the Shramana nature of the text, in despite of its incorporation within the orthodoxy, that recommends itself to modern practitioners, you know, in the 21st century, can I call it a postmodern situation, you know. And that is what recommends it to us, I think.
And that's why you've chosen to use it.
Well, it's always been closer to me than most yogic texts. You know, I've lived with it for longer, and I do like that purity, that what I call transcultural purity. It means it makes it very, very applicable to all kinds of people without them having to play at dressing up.
But it has been interpreted in lots of different ways, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Both within the Sanskrit traditions and obviously it's coming to the modern world. There are now hundreds of translations into English, all different. But also, you know, many commentaries within the Sanskrit tradition, right the way from shortly after Patanjali's time, right the way up to now. You know, but it seems even that maybe Patanjali wrote one of the main commentaries himself. He's now what scholars are now saying that there's the big commentary, Yoga Bhāsya, was by Patanjali himself. But I mean, this is a matter for scholars, you know. But many interpretations.
And you have interpreted it yourself, haven't you? You've made your own interpretation.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, what I'm going to be offering and working with is how it's worked. Is based on how it's worked for me. I do find many of the extant interpretations pretty incoherent, to be honest, and not useful. I do think we have to come fresh to it, and I certainly have. And I'll put my cards on the table. You do Patanjali with me, and it's what I've made of it. I'm not going to pretend that to some kind of authority that nobody can pretend to accept for having lived with it and practiced it for a lifetime. That's where I'm coming from with it, and I don't know what's better and safer than that for students, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, there's certain pompous people do kind of sit on a throne and say this is how it is.
Yeah.
And the evidence is against them. I'm afraid.
Would you say there's always something more and something fresh that you can find in it almost every time you come and revise it and look at it again?
Precisely, yeah. I do. I keep finding layers and layers and layers of meaning on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and it's a testimony to its brilliance as something that can help us. Is that it works on that level. It's kind of inexhaustible. It's inexhaustible, and you know, as I'm saying, you could write the entire thing on 2 sides of A4.
Yeah. A pretty clever chap then.
Well,
or a few people, whoever
yeah,
wrote
to
it.
my mind, the best of it is really that pregnant and that powerful.
So when did you first encounter Patanjali?
Ages ago. I was probably about 14 or maybe 15 when I encountered it. Quite by accident. I was interested in yoga because we'd had a religious studies teacher who had been a Christian missionary in India, you know, and I was always up for asking awkward questions about religion.
Yeah,
And
I bet you were.
And the one day she kind of said, "I'll go away and read this," and put a book in my hand on world religions, you know, a big thick book which I devour. And there was stuff in about yoga in there which it just grabbed me somehow. I just felt a resonance with it. I felt a resonance with what was said in this book. Even though I think it was a book for Christian missionaries to try and get a handle on what the Indians were thinking in order to try and convert them.
Yeah, yeah.
And then a little short while after that, it turned out a friend of mine, he just put it in my hand one day because I'd been talking about yoga in the religious studies class.
Patanjali, he
put Patanjali into my hand. In fact, you know, Swami Vivekananda's translation of the Yoga Sutra,
yeah.
which is called Raj Yoga,
right,
which is done in something like 1898. He had a first edition of that, which his mother had been interested in, and they were all in a box in the attic. And he'd got all these other books by Vivekananda, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Gyan Yoga, and so on. These little collection of books, you know. But the first one was the Yoga Sutra, and I've still got it.
Still got that copy?
I've still got it. Yeah, it's kind of falling to bits. It's on thin Indian paper. And it's kind of brown around the edges, but I've still got it. So,
how did you feel about it when you first read it?
I was intrigued and puzzled and troubled in many ways, you know, because it seemed that what Vivekananda was asking us to do was impossible.
Impossible.
Yeah, it was to just sit there and like put this sort of monkey wrench on your brain so that it'd stop working.
Yeah.
You know, and I certainly couldn't switch off the internal dialogue for more than a second, you know.
Yeah.
And also, he seemed to me had such a puritanical and sniffy attitude to sex.
Which for a 14-year-old boy,
is
a little bit disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were working class kids, you know, we were pretty amoral, you know, and we were at an age where we were obsessed with sex. And so that troubled me, because I really, whatever this yoga was about, I was resonating with it at the same time as this horny teenager. So it's
yeah.
So yeah, it was.
You've been working with it a long time.
It was pretty momentous, yeah, and it's I've just been there like chewing on the Yoga Sutra ever since, and obviously looking at other English translations, and I've looked at many, but also getting to grips with the Sanskrit and the technical meaning of the terms and so on, plus practicing it, plus having received instruction in it by from a learned Brahmin, you know, who'd himself worked with it for a lifetime, you know. So there was that input as well, you know. So obviously now, 50 years down the line, and as I say, you know, I have my own take, and I am unashamedly saying this is my take. You know, I think it's a pretty good one.